Hey, what if I told you that most of your problems are probably thinking problems, that you are one thought away from some problems going away? But most people struggle with either underthinking or overthinking. And I want to talk to you specifically about how to get out of overthinking in this video. Stay tuned. Listen, I heard one writer, read one writer make a statement in a book he wrote. I think I read it years ago. And he said, almost every problem you face is a wisdom problem. Now, this is what he was saying. He wasn't saying that all problems exist because of the absence of wisdom. That's not what he's saying, right? Sometimes life is lifing. But what he's saying is, no matter what the cause of the problem is, the answer to the problem is going to involve wisdom. So it may not have been the absence of wisdom that got you in, but it's the presence of wisdom that's going to get you out. And when I drill down on that concept a little bit more, it's like, well, that means almost every problem is a thinking problem, right? I am one thought away from a solution to a problem that I'm facing. I'm not trying to oversimplify all of our problems, but I do want us to go from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, from a victim mindset to a victor mindset, where we realize and recognize in many cases we have more power than we're aware of when it comes to changing our predicament. And here's the issue when it comes to thinking as it relates to problem solving. There are many people whose issue is their underthinking. And underthinking is very often an expression of a fixed mindset. And it's in many cases, it's an expression of imposter syndrome. It is a person who has come to the conclusion that I can't do anything about this. This is bigger than me. I'm helpless. Things are hopeless, etc. And so this leads to underthinking, not ruminating enough on potential solutions to address a specific problem. There's another issue, and that issue isn't underthinking. Sometimes it's overthinking. Right? Sometimes overthinking does cause problems, but I think there are times when overthinking gets in the way of us coming up with solutions to get out of a problem. And there are a number of scriptures that kind of speak indirectly to this idea of overthinking. But one that comes to my mind is Philippians 4, where Paul is really talking to believers in Philippi about a pathway to peace. And it's really, really interesting here because it's almost as if Paul's asserting your peace requires your participation. I want you to think about it. It's like he's debunking the myth that I just pray for peace and then God pulls up with it like Uber Eats. He's like, no. He's like, peace is made available to you. But just because it's available to you doesn't mean it's accessed by you. For an example, let's say you got money in the bank and if it's in the bank, it's available to you. Right? But let's say it's old school, right? Let's say this is before like the electronic banking days or whatever. And I'm dating myself back then, but you used to have to take checks to the bank back in my day. And if you wanted to get money out, you either had to go to an ATM, put your card in and get cash out, or you had to go to the bank, right? So this is it's an old school analogy, but it's the best I got. So let's just say you got money in the bank and it's back in the old days where there's no electronic banking. It's available to you, but you only have access to it when you follow the pathways that the bank has made available for you to get access to your resources. And the bank may have said you either have to go to an ATM and put a card in, or you got to come to the bank and fill out a withdrawal slip. It's available, but you don't have access to it. To have access to it, you got to work the principles that the bank put in place. Same thing with peace. Jesus is like, in your spiritual account is peace. But if you're going to access this peace, then you got to work the principles that I prescribe. And what Paul is doing in Philippians 4 is that he's giving these people principles. He's saying, hey, if you want to have peace, this is what you got to do. You got to know what not to think about. He literally tells them, hey, these are the kinds of things to think about. And by giving them clear instruction on what to think about, he is also telling them not to think about things that aren't consistent with what he tells them to think about. Whatever's good, whatever's lovely, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, whatever's good of a good report, he says, think on these things. So watch this. And this is the issue with overthinking. The issue with overthinking is this. Sometimes we are thinking so much. We're thinking without boundaries. We're thinking without guardrails. And now our thinking slides into thoughts, scenarios, patterns that are disempowering instead of empowering. See, overthinking isn't just about how much you're thinking about. It's about what you're thinking about. And if you're thinking a little about the wrong thing, that's too much. I'm going to say that again. If you're thinking a little about the wrong thing, it's too much. It's overthinking. Whatever's good, whatever's lovely, whatever's of good report, if there be anything virtuous, if there be anything praiseworthy, think on these things. This doesn't mean we deny reality. Faith doesn't deny reality. Faith believes God to change it. But ruminating on scenarios and situations that are not helpful is actually overthinking, because you don't need many thoughts to get you out. You need one. You are literally one thought away from making a problem go away. So Dharius, what do I do about this? Dharius, you're a pragmatist, you're practical. What do I do about this? But there's another scripture that gives insight and advice to those of us who struggle with overthinking. And it is simply this. This is the King James rendering of this scripture. Gird up the loins of your mind. What does it mean? Put a girdle on your mind. What does it mean? Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, but Martin Luther, who Martin Luther King was named after, said this. He said, I can't stop a bird from flying on my head, but I can stop the bird from building a nest. This is, in a real sense, a powerful picture of girding up the loins of your mind, meaning, hey, put a girdle on your mind that when you see and sense your mind drifting into thoughts that are disempowering, that you put a boundary there and you tighten up what you're thinking about so that you're not overthinking on the wrong thing. This requires intentionality. I read a quote recently in the book where a guy said, the mind that is unattended defaults into chaos. So without intentionality, my mind's gonna go on this negative spiral. But when I sense myself shifting, when I sense myself shifting into that which is disempowering, if I'm literally saying, no, I'm not gonna think about that. Like, you don't even have to go to positive thinking. You can go to what's called neutral thinking. Say, hey, I may not be able to think about this yet, but I'm not gonna think about that. That is the equivalent of girding up the loins of your mind. And when you begin to do this spiritually, it has implications naturally. It's literally called neuroplasticity, where there's this rewiring of the brain so that your default thinking patterns now become more aligned with that which is biblical and spiritual and not that which is natural. So I know it's hard. You say, Dharius, it's hard. I know it's hard. But in life, God lets you choose your heart. You can choose the heart of not trying to gird up the loins of your mind, and living your whole life going in negative spirals. Or you can choose the heart of saying, I'm going to fight this fight, even though it's hard, because I'd rather it be hard short term, easy long term, than easy short term, hard long term. This is the danger of overthinking. You are one thought away from some problems going away. Take care.